Involution theory. This year I had planned to write and post an article to express my own conception of the world and life. To have my own among this digital ocean, among the other billions of opinions about the world and life floating out there. Being a new project for me and considering myself somewhat unprepared, I was postponing the endeavor, waiting for the perfect moment. The recent rapid evolution in the way AI has embedded itself in our lives somehow pulled me out of inertia, because at this rate of development, it won't be long before an AI processor, by piecing together the data and information it has been trained with, will hallucinate a similar conception. So, by exposing it now, at least I can console myself with the thought that I haven't plagiarized, should it be so. Because suddenly, it seems very likely that within a fairly short time horizon, an intelligent robot will be able to answer many of the unanswered questions we have been carrying with us since the dawn of time. And as a premonition, because history has the gift of repeating itself, I believe the first intelligent robot will be named Moses, and its creator and programmer will give it a tablet with 10 instructions not to be violated by its deeds. The first instruction, as has been in other times, will be, "Thou shalt not kill," because the killing of a robot by another robot will mean, among other things, the disappearance of the identity of a person who used the respective robot as an avatar. Evidence number 1. The Gospel according to John, verse 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. In my interpretation, the word from the biblical verse that is said to have been in the beginning does not refer to a vocabulary word, but to the word in the sense of a code, that is, an instruction from the genetic code by which the human being operates. Just as a programmer, through the instructions of a programming language, designs and brings a robot to life, so did God genetically encode instructions through a programming language in which the letters are amino acids, and they combine into words that are peptides, which in turn combine into sentences or phrases, simpler or more complex, just like the corresponding proteins. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, is a phrase that actually means that in the beginning we were just codes in a programming language in the mind of a bioengineer who then created us, and who in the Bible is called God. Just as the artificial intelligence simulations that will live in their TV reality, or the intelligent robots that will populate the world we know, will become avatars for us humans, who will transfer our memory and identity into their cybernetics, so too have we humans served as avatars to beings superior to us, for their purposes. Logic circuits are for us as the green euglena was for them, and the microprocessor is like the neuron. With the evolution of AI and the emergence of intelligent robots, we remain in an entropic universe but much less relative, and the paradigms of life change. In us, it was an evolution through humanization over biology. In intelligent robots, it will be software programming over technology. But fundamentally, it is the fact that it is not an evolution from simple to complex as proposed by evolutionary theory. It is an evolution from complex to simple. The human genome is like a vast collection of interconnected software programs. It is hard to believe that this complexity could have appeared without the intervention of a creator/programmer who designed everything from a higher level to a lower one, instead of evolving from simple systems to complex systems accidentally or through the mechanism of natural selection. Natural selection exists, but it is an expression of the genetic code, not a generator of it. We are the product of beings superior to us, just as intelligent robots will be our product and will serve our interests or ideals. But what is the code that leads us, and what does it want from us? Proof number 2. Genesis 2:16-17. About the parable of the forbidden fruit. The Lord God took Adam and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded Adam, "You may eat from any tree in the garden, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die." The parable of the forbidden fruit. Adam and Eve were advised by God not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. They disobeyed the command, and their disobedience attracted divine punishment and expulsion from paradise. In the light of the above, with God as the creator and programmer of the human genome, which contains the necessary instructions for building and operating the human body, the interpretation I give to this sequence is that it was an evolution, an upgrade 3.0 brought to the initial genetic code. 1.0 equal reptilian brain, 2.0 equal limbic brain, 3.0 equal neocortex. The knowledge of good and evil by man I translate as the knowledge of pleasure and pain by man. Pain and pleasure are in fact two extremes of the same spectrum of sensations and are processed by about the same neuronal structures and circuits in the brain. Essentially, there are not two completely separate systems for pain and pleasure, but rather a single system that processes both types of sensations. This upgrade, let's call it 3D, adding the characteristic to experience the knowledge of pleasure and pain through their processing in the neocortex. That's what made Adam and Eve human. Before, the system of behaviors associated with reward and punishment was completely predetermined in the limbic brain. Once interconnected with the neocortex, the opportunity was given for free will to influence the modulation, interpretation, and influence of signals associated with pleasure and pain. And through this, we were given the 3D ability to control the reaction to stimuli through a mediated response in correlation with who each of us is, not in accordance with a predetermined ideal. When Adam had the first desire, then he became human. And the underlying code that controls us is based on the secretion of dopamine and the feeling of pleasure/happiness associated with it. Through this, a new characteristic was added to humankind. Man became an autonomous being, encoded with the information necessary to provide the motivation for self-evolution. Because it motivates us more to search in a personal key, that is, to imprint our own stamp, the behaviors or stimuli that are beneficial to us, reward, and to avoid what is harmful. Beyond the biological needs that we share with any biological body, there exists this force that propels us and that lies at the foundation of our motivation. It pushes us forward and brings us to light. It is the desire to have what we do not have, the psychology of the forbidden fruit from the Bible. After feasting, the lion stops hunting. We do not. This is what distinguishes us from less evolved biological or technological beings. Thus, we are led as avatars by the overlords, by code, with stick and carrot. We are driven by our often unruly desires and our often uncontrolled fears, and through our desires, they realize their ideals. Therefore, metaphorically speaking, the expulsion from paradise is the expulsion from the subconscious to re-education on earth. The Garden of Eden is the subconscious, and the isolation in the neocortex is the prison of labor and re-education in mortal life. Liberation is to find the ways to reconnect with our subconscious where desires are fulfilled as in fairy tales, without the need to work for them. As I said, in our entropic universe, things evolve from complex to simple, not the other way around. Humans cannot create entities more evolved than themselves, only simpler than themselves. We, as humans, have invented robots to work for us and make our lives easier. They are a simplification of us, but at the same time an amplification of our power. By the same model, we were made by beings superior to us, overlords, not to work for them, but for them to experience through us sensations and emotions, through us as their avatars, and through the neural connection they have with us via the subconscious, matrilink. They experience our reality. For them, this is an amplification of their senses, and through this, we, as overlord avatars, are useful to them just as robots are useful to us. In practice, having said all this, we are not much further along than we were 10 minutes ago when I began discussing them. I've come with some considerations about our condition, but how to improve it is a completely different story. However, a first step would be to first understand it, and that's the premise I started from. Perhaps a first lesson to transcend our condition of being simple humans driven by the psychology of the forbidden fruit would be to stop being so transactional in life, to stop chasing solely after our own interests. Even modern mathematics has shown in game theory that pursuing one's own interest does not lead to the best individual outcome, simply because the other participants are pursuing their own interests too, and the resultant effect is suboptimal. A better individual result could have been achieved if all participants had cooperated, taking into account their common interests. Yet, if we swing to the other extreme and guide ourselves by this any transactional precept, we'll fall easy prey to the jackals lurking around, as illustrated further down in the example with the bad boy versus nice guy. For the level of evolution the world is currently at, the best strategy remains an eye for an eye, tit for tat. You don't strike first, but if you are hit, you retaliate immediately. At the root of our behavior and emotional responses lies the reward and punishment system, but it is also influenced by and works in correlation with the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, which manages the fear of threats. Our subjective experience of pleasure is not due to the absolute level of dopamine alone, but also how the brain interprets and responds to this level in the context of external environment or internal factors it correlates with, and we can exploit certain non-linearities in its dynamics to our advantage. Our brain is extraordinarily sensitive to changes or contrasts and perceives contrast as more intense than constancy. When fluctuations are large and rapid, switching abruptly from pleasure to pain and back, the contrast between these states is felt more intensely by our perceptual system. Comparatively, constant and prolonged exposure to a source of pleasure causes the perception induced by the brain's reward system to self-diminish. For instance, although the difference in speed is the same, we perceive sensations in a completely different way on a carousel compared to a high-speed train. When dopamine is secreted erratically, the sensation felt is more intense than when its release is linear. Moreover, there is an asymmetry in how we feel pain or pleasure along a unitary scale, especially when viewed in terms of loss/gain. This sensation asymmetry is directly influenced by the individual's fear. If we could completely eliminate fear from the equation, our reactions on the pain-pleasure scale would be more balanced. But the fact is that we are wired to be more sensitive to pain than to pleasure, and this is even more apparent in the way we act regarding potential gains compared to potential losses. It was considered safer for us to be primarily designed this way. Avoiding pain is equivalent to avoiding risks that could compromise our survival. Pleasure, although beneficial, is not crucial for our survival. Fear is a subjective experience and can vary considerably from individual to individual. For the more fearful, the asymmetry is greater. Only they call it caution. Another way in which the reward or punishment system operates somewhat illogically is that when rewards are offered inconsistently or unpredictably, they can have a stronger reinforcing effect on behaviors or increase their frequency compared to when the reward is consistent. Behaviors that lead to these rewards are more likely to be repeated in anticipation, even in the absence of an immediate reward. Simply put, if you don't know when you'll receive a reward, you're more inclined to repeat the behavior in the hope that you will receive that reward. This type of programming is often used in gambling or video games, where rewards are given at variable and unpredictable intervals. Routine makes the perception of sensations more subdued, while new experiences are felt more intensely. Take, for instance, a football game with your favorite team. When they are leading 3-0, it doesn't feel the same as when the score is 4-3. The brain prefers the inconsistency and unpredictability of a bad boy over the stability of a nice guy. What is offered with consistency and predictability becomes the norm and is no longer perceived as special or remarkable. Pleasure gets along with uncertainty, not stability. Mystery and the unexpected give rise to surprise and emotion, whether it be of joy or sorrow. Besides the illusion induced by dopamine, imagination is another realm where one can lose touch with reality. It's important to be aware that in life, you have to deal with these two mirages. Imagination is a sliver of the greater universe downloaded into your memory that you manage as you see fit. It's a smaller universe where you set the rules. It is your playground or your training ground. The way you create and shape yourself in your imagination is how you will manifest in the real world, and in terms of how you relate to pleasure and pain. You can be fearful, resigned/stoic, brave, or even heroic. Or you can be ascetic, altruistic, selfish, or dependent/addicted. In a zero-sum game, you're better off being selfish. Bad boy equal the confident or dominant type, who puts his own interests first and is indifferent to the needs of others, rather than altruistic. Nice guy equal the kind and attentive type to the needs of others, or who hides his true intentions under the guise of kindness. But the most losing hand in any life circumstance you have when you are fearful. I mean, when you are dominated by learned fears in as many areas of life as possible. Avoid the spectrum of fear at all costs. In my opinion, the link between the nice guy and altruism and that between bad boys and selfishness is just a correlation. The causality lies in how they relate to fear, which is the catalyst that determines their belonging to one category or the other. The spectrum of fear dominates nice guys, which is why they adopt this strategy and why they are perceived as weak. Bad boys have found a way to subjugate their fear. Build a mentality supported by courage, not undermined by fear. The purpose of life might be to escape the neocortex, where you are driven by the fear of pain and the pursuit of pleasure, dominated by greed and ego. A good path for those who can follow it is meditation, but there are also many others. I have used motorsport. To practice it at a level above amateur, you must step out of the neocortex. You know you have evolved when your breathing is regular and your heartbeat hasn't soared into the stratosphere while engaging in it. I believe that contact sports can also be such a path. Resist the temptation of pleasures that degrade you and confront your fear. Seek stoicism and heroism in life. The interpretation above is in a continuous state of evolution and transformation. Any contribution is welcome and appreciated. Perhaps in time, I will revisit this theme. For now, I want to begin studying another interesting and somewhat controversial subject. Let's call it the law of the opposition of contraries, the apparently paradoxical aspect that manifests when you try to attract or repel something or someone. Thus both people and things, and an opposing force intervenes, influencing the outcome you desire. Somehow, the result we obtain is profoundly influenced by our attitude and the area or direction from which we approach it, either from a place of lack and poverty upwards, thus from need, or from a place of wealth or abundance downwards, thus from surplus. Somehow, the final outcome is not a product of our will but of the attitude with which we approach reality, how we position ourselves towards it. The universe seems to retreat from us and avoid us when it sees us dominated by need, but comes to meet us when we act with detachment from a place where we feel full of possibilities. When you try to attract someone from a place of need, you indirectly generate in them a force of repulsion. And when you try to repel someone from a place of completeness, where you are or position yourself, you become even more attractive. Although it seems counterintuitive, when we try too hard to attract someone, we involuntarily achieve the opposite effect and appear unattractive. In contrast, when we strive to distance ourselves from someone, we involuntarily become more attractive. Somehow, as in the Gospel according to Mark 4:25, "For to those who have, more will be given, and from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away." Unlimit your mind.